to the FANATICS podcast. I'm your host, Hani. Joining me, as always, is Zeeshan.
Yo.
All right, man. We are mere games away from the end of this regular season. Time has flown. Honestly, it doesn't feel that long ago that we were at the beginning of the season. Brooklyn was chaotic, and the NBA was just getting started.
Yeah, man, and I would say this season's been one of the best in recent memory. I think these playoffs should be some of the best that we've ever seen as well.
Yeah. Now, we will be doing our playoff round one predictions, obviously, in the next episode, because right now the official bracket has not been finalized yet.
It's chaos right now.
Yeah, it is absolutely chaos, especially in the Western Conference in particular. But we basically now are at the point where we've seen it all. We've seen everything that's happened in the regular season. So now it's time for us to give you guys our official locked-in predictions for the NBA award, or who we feel deserves the NBA award from this season. Now, we usually do a preseason prediction, obviously before the season, trying to predict what would happen. We also do a mid-season update as to where we think teams are at before or after the trade deadline. And this is going to be our final prediction based on everything, the whole collective season. And yeah, we're basically going to be picking and choosing our winners. We usually give about three, contending people as our contestants, and then we choose a winner between those three. And yeah, this year there's been some interesting names. There's been some movement. I think from previous seasons there was a lot of repeat names, and it was a little bit stale in some, especially for some awards. This year I think we have a lot more originality, a lot more newer names that's come in, and I think that's a testament to how the season has played out, where things have just been more competitive. Things are just completely different. We've had new teams in the top of the standings versus in previous seasons.
Yeah, there's a lot of fresh faces across the board, right? So I think, as you mentioned, that basically symbolizes what the season has been. We talk about parity a lot and how it had been destroyed for the past, like 10 years or so, prior to the last couple of years. But I think this season has really shown what parity can do for the NBA. And as a result, the NBA's ratings have been some of the highest it's ever been in a while. So I think this is a good model for the NBA moving forward in terms of what they want the competitive landscape to be. And I think it's going to continue just because of the fact that the talent level is growing across the board. When you look at, the young guys coming in now, and then as well when you factor in international play and the amount of success and talent that international play has gotten and is going to continue to have. So I think it's just looking up for the NBA.
It's a weird changing of eras moment, I think, and now we're getting into a new era where things are starting to evolve and get a little bit more different now. Like, we got the super team era, we got like LeBron's era, now we're kind of moving slowly away from that, I think, into a new parity-filled era.
And a new, I think, global era,
Yeah.
I think you can call it, because even looking next year, first pick is going to be another international player. And if you look across the board, how many international players are there now in terms of all NBA compared to what it was even 10 years ago?
Yeah, for sure. So, saying all that, we're going to be breaking down each and every single award and giving you guys our picks on the winners. First and foremost, we're going to start off with the Coach of the Year award. Now, this award in particular has changed this season in particular, but it's also a lot tougher to analyze with this sort of award, because not only are you looking at how well does the team perform, but you're also looking at the impact that certain coach has made during the season. And first and foremost, I think there's no coach that we can probably say has made the biggest leap than Mike Brown of the Sacramento Kings. Mike Brown, obviously, he has done the what has seemed to be the impossible. He has literally
insane.
Yeah, it is insane. He has led the Sacramento Kings not only to a top 3 seed in the Western Conference, but they're a playoff team now. They've snapped their 16 or 17-year playoff drought.
Last time they made it was 2006.
Yeah.
And last time I think they won a series was 2004, I think, something like that.
Yep. So it's been a very long time since the Sacramento Kings have made the playoffs. And Mike Brown has led the Sacramento Kings in his first season to the NBA playoffs now for the first time in 16 years. And they are a top 3 seed. And I think the biggest reason why that even happened was because he changed the locker room. He brought in a new culture. Obviously with his time spent in Golden State, winning championships, he really learned and how to establish that culture and how to really bring a winning atmosphere. And I think he really has done that for the Kings. They're a fun team to watch. They play hard on both ends of the floor. Shout out to the Beam. I mean, the Beam has been the Beam has been revolutionary. But yeah, for the most part, I think the Kings have just been a much more legitimate product, and I think they've been the biggest surprise of the season by far.
Yeah, man. If you're talking about the Sacramento Kings, it's been very insane what has gone on in Sacramento. Again, Minnesota and Sacramento fans, I would have never blamed them for bandwagoning another team because those franchises have had a lot of pain. But to be honest, I think everyone's rooting for the Kings this playoffs. I think Kings fans well deserved, man. You guys deserve some happiness now. And I think the main factor you talked about with Mike Brown was the locker room culture. Him, learning how to. He was already a successful coach to some degree before that, with obviously the LeBron teams in Cleveland. But in Golden State, he really learned how to win and how to establish a winning culture compared to Cleveland, where it's mainly, let's be honest, LeBron. That was the winning factor, right? Golden State really has a winning culture. Shout out to Steve Kerr for that. And I think Mike Brown being on those sidelines really helped him. When he came back to Sacramento, too, we remember last season with the Domantas Sabonis, Tyrese Halliburton trade. Us, including everyone else, were also pretty down on it. But it ended up being a good trade for both teams. And I think Mike Brown has a lot to do with that because of the fact that he really unlocked the Sacramento Kings' offense. There was questions about how De'Aaron Fox's fast play style would fit with Domantas Sabonis' really in-between kind of play style and offense. But they've made it work really well. Keegan Murray has come in. They've had a bunch of good, bench players, Malik Monk, etc. So they've done really well. They're first-ranked offense in the league. Now, what are they going to do come playoff time? I think everyone's looking at them as the weak link just because of the experience factor. But as a regular season award, man, Mike Brown has more than deserves to be one of these top 3 candidates for the Coach of the Year award.
Yeah, for sure. So then speaking of our next candidate for the Coach of the Year award, we have JB Bickerstaff. JB Bickerstaff has honestly gone very low-key under the radar with the Cleveland Cavaliers this season. He's led the Cavaliers to a top 4 seed after being, I believe they were the 6th seed last season.
And again, they were only the 6th seed because they just got killed by injuries at the end of the season. Otherwise, they were a top 3 seed.
Yeah, no, I think they missed the playoffs last season from the play-in. But regardless of the fact, they've now bounced back in a big way. They added Donovan Mitchell, and that acquisition was seamless. Became a seamless transition. I mean, I think he fit in very well with what they had going on. The team gelled together very well, and again, not only that, I think similar to what we talked about with Mike Brown, I mean, JB Bickerstaff has also changed the culture in Cleveland now. It's a completely different culture. It's a fun culture, a work hard type of culture. And, I think from the standpoint of where things were when LeBron was there and, they were in the finals and stuff, it was just more of a veteran, LeBron can lead you to the promised land kind of thing. Now it's a whole band together and win by committee sort of thing. And I think that's been a big factor into why they've been so successful this season. Not only they have a top 10 offense, they're 8th in offensive rating, but they have the number 1 defense. Their defense is so versatile. Evan Mobley and Jared Allen do a great job being the twin towers in the middle, and then obviously up front you have Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell causing havoc wherever they can. So I think for the most part, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they've had a low-key very good season, but they're a very good team.
Yeah, man, JB Bickerstaff has really done well for himself. We always looked at him as kind of the assistant coach, but I think he's really found his footing in Cleveland. Players talk about how much they really respect him in the locker room. I think one indicating factor of that is the defensive growth of Donovan Mitchell this season. He has always talked about this season in regards to his improved defense about how it was JB who really pushed him to be better on that end. And as a result, he's been a lot better on that end, helping out guys like Evan Mobley and Jared Allen and Isaac Okoro. So I think JB Bickerstaff definitely deserves to be on that list as well.
Yep. And our last candidate for the Coach of the Year award, we're going to be giving it to Joe Mazzulla of the Boston Celtics. Now, Joe Mazzulla really inherited a very weird situation after the Ime Udoka fiasco that happened earlier in the offseason or earlier in the season?
Off season.
But basically, after all that sort of mellowed out, the Boston Celtics just came into the season rolling, and they really came in after their finals appearance. They came in, they were winning a ton of games, and I think a lot of people were questioning, is this remnants of Ime Udoka's success last season, or is this Joe Mazzulla really rallying these guys together? And it kind of became a combination of both. I think after the trade deadline, we really started to respect Joe Mazzulla a lot more and really respected the job that he's done, getting the buy-in out of all his star guys. And getting all the pieces to fit together and keeping that continuity from what Ime Udoka left. So he really did the best he could with the situation that he was given. The Celtics are still a number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. They were actually the number 1 seed in the NBA for a good while until they kind of fell off a little bit. But again, the 3rd in offensive rating and 3rd in defensive rating. They are, again, a top 5 team on both ends of the floor. That's a great recipe for a championship caliber team. And the Celtics were in the finals last season.
And again, credit to Joe Mazzulla because of the fact that he's also had a lot of issues to work with when you talk about, for example, Time Lord's injury, him being in and out of the lineup, the addition of Malcolm Brogdon, he had to mesh that into the system. So he's had some issues to work with as well. But, he's kept it going thus far. They had a little bit of struggles later on in the season, but you can't expect to be the 73-9 Warriors, So I think Joe Mazzulla definitely deserves to be a candidate in that Coach of the Year award.
Yeah, but in terms of our pick for the winner of this award, I think we kind of already alluded to this earlier, but I think nobody has done a more surprising or a better job than any of these coaches than Mike Brown.
I think he's going to sweep it. I don't think anybody else is coming close.
The Kings made the damn playoffs. No other coach, and the Kings have had a revolving door of coaches over the last decade.
Listen,
plus.
Luke Walton is on their top winning list for coaches, bro.
Yeah,
Luke Walton.
They've had a ton of coaches in there, and the fact that Mike Brown not only got him into the playoffs, but they are a top 3 seed in the West, insane. Absolutely deserves the award.
For sure. Next up, we're going to move on to the Rookie of the Year award. Now, this was a bit of a down year in terms of the Rookie of the Year award. This isn't really the most talented draft class that we've seen, and honestly, everyone kind of predicted that. But it's still been a nice rookie class nonetheless. The first candidate we're going to go for is Paolo Banchero for the Orlando Magic. Now, he's averaging around 20 and 7 a game. He's basically led the race the entire season, and of course, he had a historically good start to the regular season. He was in the category of 25 and 5 players with Blake Griffin, LeBron, etc. Zion Williamson, I think. So he had a really good start to the season. Obviously, as the season's gone on, similar to what happens with other rookies, the production kind of dips a little bit. But I think the main thing for him is that he's had a starting role on an Orlando Magic team that has been surprisingly very competitive. They're not going to be in the play-in, but if you look at throughout the middle of the season where they were beating a lot of good teams, obviously Celtics fans hate the Magic because they killed them every single time. But it wasn't just the Celtics. If you look at across the board, the Magic really played well against a lot of good teams.
I mean, they beat us twice in a row. So
yeah, exactly. And shout out to Franz Wagner, Wendell Carter Jr. A lot of those guys played really well. But Paolo Banchero being a rookie, being in that starting lineup, and allowing this Orlando Magic team to be as good as it was this season, I think is a testament to how good he's been consistently throughout the season.
Yeah, I think Paolo Banchero, I think we kind of realized it in the midway part of the season that this guy is just running away with the Rookie of the Year award at this point. He looks poised, he looks polished, and I think he really quelled a lot of the doubts a lot of people had of him being the number 1 overall pick over some of the more popular names in Chet Holmgren or Jabari Smith. So I think obviously Paolo being the right choice, Orlando really definitely did their homework and got the right guy. And yeah, I think he's going to be a great player in the future.
Yeah, the second guy we're going to talk about is Jalen Williams, who's really come on strong during the second half of the season. He's averaging around 14 points, shooting 52% from the field and 36% from 3. I think in terms of Jalen Williams, he's done really well, as I said, in the latter half of the season. And in all honesty, I think he is the most polished rookie offensively of this whole draft class. And has played a huge part in OKC's success. They're still technically kind of in the play-in scenario. But yeah, Jalen Williams, I think, has been really good for them, a really good surprise for them. And now when you add him, Chet Holmgren next year, I think next year is when you really start to see what OKC can do, especially if they, package some of those picks, see what they do in the draft. I think it'll be it's looking like good times for OKC.
Yeah, I think Jalen Williams is just one of those surprise guys that right now he comes in, he looks like an established guy. He looks like a veteran that's come in. He knows his role. He can shoot the ball. He plays well on the defensive end as well. I just think he looks like a very polished guy. I think he has a lower ceiling than a guy like Paolo Banchero does, but I think in terms of being a functional rotational guy in the league, I think he's already on his way to be a great one of those.
Yeah, and the final guy we're going to talk about for the Rookie of the Year award is Walker Kessler from
Rudy
the
Gobert,
Utah
who?
Jazz. Essentially, that's literally what he's become. He's averaging 9 and 8, shooting 72% from the field, and also averaging around 2.5 blocks a game. Now, like Hani said, he's basically being Rudy Gobert's replacement. I don't think anybody thought he would be this good. It sucks as well as Raptors fans because we could have technically gotten him with our draft pick that we
Shout
trade
out
away.
Goran Dragic.
Yeah, so
Higher ambition screwed us.
it's Walker Kessler has been really, really good for the Utah Jazz. He's even made himself a name in Defensive Player of the Year conversations, which is insane as a rookie. But he's just been that good. We remember he's had multiple 5+ blocks a game. He had like 7 blocks against us, for example, that one game. So he's been really good for the Utah Jazz and has essentially just come in and become the Rudy Gobert for them.
Yeah, I think Walker Kessler. What impresses me again, he's come in, he knows his role, and he plays it well. And I think especially for bigs, being establishing themselves as a rim protector early in their career is very difficult. Again, we've seen very few guys come in and do that, and Rudy Gobert is being one of those guys. Walker Kessler has just come in and he's done it. He's blocking guys, he's contesting a lot of shots, he's not getting into a ton of foul troubles, at least from what I've seen of him. So yeah, he's just been a consistently good player, and I think he's been a great pickup and a big reason why the Utah Jazz had their early success earlier in the season.
Yeah, and I think in terms of our winner of this award, Jalen Williams and Walker Kessler certainly made it interesting to say the least. But I think in terms of consistency, Paolo Banchero has been there since the beginning of the season, and he's kind of, as I said, rode that wave throughout the whole season. So I think in terms of our pick, and I think everyone else's pick, it's a pretty easy pick of Paolo Banchero.
It's his award to lose. Like, let's be honest with you. That's just kind of what it is. But yeah, that was the Rookie of the Year award. Moving us on into the Sixth Man of the Year award. Probably the hardest award to predict, especially when we're talking about the preseason, when we do this in the preseason, because we're just like, well, I mean, this could be literally anybody at this point. But I think in terms of the Sixth Man of the Year award, it's usually the guy that can give you the most consistent production off the bench, usually the best bench scorer, the bench gunner. So yeah, we have a few of those guys, and some of these names have definitely changed over this past season versus other seasons. First and foremost, our first candidate that we got for the Sixth Man of the Year award is Malcolm Brogdon of the Boston Celtics. I mean, there's not really much more to say about Malcolm Brogdon. I mean, he averages 15 points a game, 4 rebounds, and nearly 4 assists, shooting 48% from the field, 44% from 3. And he's just a solid backup guard. He's a steady hand, and not only that, he's been doing it for the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. And the thing about him is that he steps up big when they need him to. He's reliable. He can hit shots. He
closes out games a lot of the time.
He's reliable not only with his shooting. He can run the offense. He's also defensively sound. He's just a reliable player overall on both ends. And I think, again, putting him behind a guy like Marcus Smart just gives the Celtics another luxury in their depth.
Yeah, man, I think it's a testament how good the Boston Celtics roster is when you have a starting caliber point guard in Malcolm Brogdon coming off of your bench. And it's really paid wonders for the Celtics because he's really been that steady factor in their second unit. He can be a floor spacer, he can be a facilitator, a little bit of a defender, so he checks off all the boxes that you want from a Sixth Man of the Year candidate.
Yeah. So moving us into our second candidate for the Sixth Man of the Year award, this player really defines the Sixth Man of the Year sort of description that I laid out in terms of, we're talking about Norman Powell of the Los Angeles Clippers. He's obviously your typical bench gunner. He's off the bench, averaging nearly about 17 points a game, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, shooting 47% from the field, 40% from 3. Man, how would the Raptors really kill for that right now?
Yeah.
It's a sad one. But basically, Norman Powell, again, off the bench, he's been putting up solid numbers for the Clippers, as we've expected him to do. Not only that, I think he's been a great shooter for the Clippers, giving them some great spacing so he can play with Kawhi, without Kawhi and Paul George. And again, he's your typical Sixth Man of the Year player who comes in off the bench and just gets buckets. And I think the consistency, I think, has been the biggest improvement for Norman Powell this season. It's just the fact that he's come in and he's consistently been productive, which is something that we couldn't really say in his early years in Toronto. But I think, yeah, shout out to Norman Powell. He's had a great season.
Yeah, man, he's been essentially what the Clippers have needed him to be. And then the depth pieces with him, Batum, Rocco, that's essentially what gives the Clippers an edge over other teams.
Yeah, the depth has definitely been big for the Clippers this season. And the final player that we have to talk about for the Sixth Man of the Year candidacy is Emmanuel Quickley of the New York Knicks. Now Emmanuel quickly averages about 14 points a game, 4 rebounds, nearly 3.5 assists, shooting about 45% from the field and 36% from three. I think with Emmanuel quickly, he's been a consistent spark plug for the Knicks off the bench. He comes in, he brings a lot of energy. He's really fast as well. This guy is really quick. He can push the tempo. He's just a great energy guy to bring off your bench. And I think for the New York Knicks, a team that's had a very good season from their standards, Emmanuel quickly has just been a big part of it. I think in terms of the other three candidates, he's not the most reliable shooter and most consistent guy though. But I think in terms of health wise, he's played far more games than any other player that on our candidacy list. But we
Yeah,
figured we'd
man.
include him.
Emmanuel quickly has been good for the New York Knicks. He's closed a lot of games for them as well. Obviously with RJ Barrett unfortunately playing like trash half the time. But Emmanuel quickly shout out to him because he's really improved offensively. He understands now more of what to do, what his role is going to be. He can shoot the ball. Obviously not as good as these other two guys, but he is still a pretty good shooter at around 37%. The biggest thing for him, though, is his defense has massively improved this year. And as a result, Tom Thibodeau trusts him to close out a lot of games. So I think Emmanuel quickly has made a huge jump this year, and he's been a really important factor for the New York Knicks, especially as I talked about with RJ Barrett stinking up half the time.
Yeah. So in terms of the winner of the Sixth Man of the Year award, we're kind of split on who we think should win it. For me personally, I think Malcolm Brogdon deserves the win. I think he's great on he's been reliable on both ends of the floor, and he's been a big contributor as to why the Celtics have a number 2 seed. But Zeeshan has Emmanuel quickly as his winner.
Yeah, man. For me, Emmanuel quickly, I think games played is I value that a little bit more in this conversation, especially when you compare it to Norman Powell, who's played around 60 games, and Malcolm Brogdon, who's played 67, 68-ish games right now. So I think for me, just because of the fact that Emmanuel quickly has been there essentially for the whole season, he's kind of done his thing. He's allowed New York to be. He's been a really important factor of New York having their success that they've had this season. And him being that kind of two-way player that he's been for the New York Knicks, I think I'll have him as my Sixth Man of the Year. Moving on to the Most Improved Player of the Year award. Starting us off, we're going to talk about, obviously, Lauri Markkanen. He's averaging 26 points a game, around 9 rebounds, shooting 50% from the field and 39% from three. Now, with Lauri Markkanen, obviously, you saw the potential, even going back to his Chicago days, but nobody thought he would be this good for the Utah Jazz.
Not immediately as well.
Yeah, and I think if Cleveland had thought that they would be this good, I think they would still make the trade, but you'd have to get some assets back in return. Some more. It would be I don't know. It would be a different sort of trade than what would have happened initially. But shout out to Danny Ainge because he really got a steal with Lauri Markkanen. He's turned into, what do they call him, the finisher. I think he set the record for most dunks and threes combined in a season. Damn. Which is pretty insane because if you think about it, everyone knows him as a shooter, but he's really improved his inside game this season. He's posterized a bunch of people this season. He has a huge poster compilation this season. So Lauri Markkanen has been really good for the Utah Jazz, and the Utah Jazz were a surprisingly competitive team. And with Lauri Markkanen spearheading that as the first option for the Jazz, I think he deserves a ton of credit and a ton of praise for this MIP conversation.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with Lauri Markkanen, and I think he fits the most improved players, is just he came out of nowhere. I think he just really took his game to a whole nother level with the Jazz. I think obviously he bought into the new coach whose name is
Will Hardy.
Will Hardy's. So where his new system that he's come in, he's really bought in, really accepted it, and he's come in and done a great job this season. I mean, he became a first-time All-Star as well. So I mean, shout out to Lauri Markkanen. Has had a great season.
The next guy we're going to talk about, shout out to Canada, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, averaging 31 points a game, 5.5 assists, shooting 51% from the field, and around league average from three. Now, this isn't really a surprise, but I think just the leap that he's taken this season compared to last is similar kind of what I think Ja Morant did a season ago. So I think we have to put him in this conversation. He's turned himself into one of the most consistent scorers in the league today, and also one of the most clutch players. And as a result, OKC, as I talked about with Jalen Williams, OKC has been surprisingly very competitive this season. And obviously the determining factor in that is the play of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's been absolutely insane thus far.
I can't say anything bad about future Raptor Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. I'm gonna speak that into existence. But basically, Shea's been fantastic this season. I think this level of scoring ability has been something that been a revelation. I think that has really helped OKC, and it's really propelled them to winning more than they probably would have liked to win, to be honest with you. Because Danny Ainge has been scouting his kids, man. He's been looking at those picks. But basically, Shea's been fantastic this season, and I think it would be kind of weird to give him the Most Improved Player
Sam
award.
Presti, you mean?
Sorry, Sam Presti is Danny Ainge is also scouting his kids too, but Sam Presti's doing it better. But basically, yes, that's Shea has took his game to another level, and I think for Oklahoma City, I think that could be very good, either very good for them, or it could make him a lot more impatient to get to winning sooner. So it really depends.
I think next season will be the true test for the OKC Thunder. The final guy we're going to talk about for this MIP award is Mikal Bridges. Now he's averaging 20 points a game, 47% from the field, and 40% from three, and also with the one steal. Now, obviously, since the KD trade when he went to Brooklyn, he's been averaging over 22 points a game, and he's really broken out, and you can see what he can do. He's really banking on the potential that we saw with him in Phoenix. Now that he has that number one option, number one role, he's had multiple 30-plus point games. I think he's even had. Did he have a 50-point game? I think as well.
Think he's had a 50
he's had a 40-point game as well. So Mikal Bridges has really shown what he can do in a new system where he's the guy. I don't even think anybody expected him to be this good. Obviously, people knew he would be able to take that step forward, but I think to the degree that he's shown in the second half of the season, I don't think anybody thought that he would be this good. And the thing I like about Mikal Bridges too is that he's played every single game of his career. I think so. Yeah. So he is an Iron Man. Shout out to him and Kevon Looney. He plays every single game. Now you know what the Brooklyn Nets have. The Nets front office knows what they're gonna have with Mikal Bridges moving forward. And now I think, as we talked about after the trade, that now you have a solid building foundation moving forward. And with Mikal Bridges at the helm, I think you have a ton of good options moving forward. I think the only problem is with the MIP conversation is that it's a bit too late for him, just because of the fact that the trade deadline was like 3/4 of the way through the season, and he doesn't have that sort of most improved resume that the other two guys on this list have.
Yeah, I've liked Mikal Bridges since he was drafted. I think he's been a great player, and I always thought he was going to be a very good role player in this league. I think now that he's been in Brooklyn, you've seen the potential that he can take as being a number one, number two option on a playoff caliber team. So now that we're seeing him blossom into that sort of player, it's been great to see. But like you said, he not only has the great availability, he's always available to play, which is great. He's been consistent, but I think again, because his sort of true leap kind of happened after the trade deadline, it's kind of hard to put him in the same realm as someone like Shea or even Lauri Markkanen for that matter. Yeah,
and speaking of Lauri Markkanen, obviously our award winner for the Most Improved Player of the Year award is Lauri Markkanen. I think he's probably going to be everyone's award winner. Just because, as we talked about, he really came out of nowhere compared to a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was already established. Mikal Bridges, it was too small of a sample size. So Lauri Markkanen, he really took a massive, massive step. I think he really embodies what the MIP award is supposed to be. So shout out to Lauri Markkanen.
Yeah, shout out to Lauri Markkanen.
Speaking of which, he has to apparently join the army now, or train in the army. So, which is,
he'll be in shape for season. That's all we know. But shout out to Lauri Markkanen for MIP. Bringing us into the Defensive Player of the Year award. Now, this award has always been the sort of the stale award, the award that we always kind of just recycle the same three names. But this season, it's been very different, and we've had a lot of new names into this conversation. And honestly, it's a very tough award to pick. I can see this going in multiple different ways.
Well, there's no really. It's really hard to quantify this award as well, so it becomes an issue that way as well.
Yeah, and I think for the defense, it's a combination of metrics. So it's the stats, the eye test, and I think team impact. I think it's a kind of a combination of all three. So for us, the candidates for the Defensive Player of the Year award, our first one is going to be Brook Lopez of the Milwaukee Bucks. I think for Brook Lopez, he's averaging about 16 points a game this season, nearly 7 rebounds, shooting 53% from the field, 37% from three. That's important. But basically, I think the biggest things with Brook Lopez is he's averaging about 2.5 blocks a game, and he's 11th in defensive plus minus ratings. And I think what's important with that is that because he's 11th in defensive plus minus, the Bucks have the fourth ranked defensive rating in the league, and he plays a major role in it. He's been a great a rim protector. He's been a great shot blocker, and I think he's really enabled Giannis to be able to be even more impactful on the defensive end because Brook Lopez is always there. And not only that, I've said it in previous episodes, he's been obviously the best player this season I've seen who can cover drop coverage. He's great at reading the role. He's just a consistently good big. And again, we've said it with Brook Lopez in the past. I don't think there's ever been any player that has completely changed his game between eras more than Brook Lopez.
Yeah, man. Like, if you go back 7-8 years ago, who would have thought, it wouldn't have made sense to say Brook Lopez, the outside shooter and defensive player of the year candidate. That would have been laughable. But he's literally done that. So, and especially at this late stage of his career as well. That's, I think, the most impressive thing. So, yeah, Brook Lopez definitely, I think, deserves to be on this list. And he's been in that conversation for essentially the whole season.
Yeah. Now, another name that we got to add to the Defensive Player of the Year conversation is Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, Jaren Jackson Jr., surprise player, obviously a first-time All-Star this season for the Memphis Grizzlies. He's averaging about 18 points a game, 7 rebounds, shooting 50% from the field, about 34% from three. Now, the thing with Jaren Jackson Jr., he's averaging 3 blocks a game and about one steal per game.
He's a block leader.
Yeah, he's leading the league in blocks right now, and I think he's been insane with how good he's been. He's 12th in defensive plus minus. He's been a crazy versatile option for the Grizzlies. Not only can he guard smaller guys, but he can guard the bigs as well and do it in relatively, like, there's no really drop off in his consistency there. And the Grizzlies have the second best defensive rating in the league, and he's a big factor into that. And I think because of the fact that the way he impacts their defense in multiple different ways, I think that's what makes him so valuable to them.
Yeah, man, Jaren Jackson Jr., I think we really saw what he could do even in his rookie season. I think the main issue with him has always been his foul trouble issues. And granted, he hasn't completely cleaned that up, but he's been much better at it this season compared to what he was in the past. And you're seeing the results, clearly, because now he can stay longer on the court. He can get those blocks. I think in general, too, you saw when Ja Morant wasn't playing even through the injuries this season that the Memphis Grizzlies had. They've consistently been able to win throughout the whole season with all of the issues that they've had. And Jaren Jackson Jr. is a massive part of that because he really just plays a stabilizing role on the defense. And on offense, obviously, he can play inside. He can play outside as well. So Jaren Jackson Jr. has turned himself into a really good player.
Yeah, not only that, I mean, his offensive production has also been great as well for the Grizzlies. And finally, the last candidate for the Defensive Player of the Year award is we're going to be giving it to Bam Adebayo of the Miami Heat. Bam, I think, really exemplifies the team impact, because I think he's second in defensive plus minus, and he averages about 21 points a game, 9 rebounds, shooting about 54% from the field. He's averaging about just under a block a game and at 1.5 steals per game, but he's also an undersized big. But I think the biggest factor is the fact that the Miami Heat have the 8th ranked defensive rating, and based on the defensive plus minus alone, you can just tell without Bam, the Miami Heat would not have a top 10 defense in the league. Like, he's second in defensive plus minus.
I mean, which defenders do Miami really have besides an older Jimmy Butler at this point? They don't really have any defenders.
No.
It's basically Bam Adebayo.
So he's the impact. And the fact that Miami has a top 10 defense in the league just shows his defensive impact for them. And he also he carries a very big offensive load as well for the Miami Heat. So, yeah, I think Bam has definitely had a great season on the defensive end. But in terms of the winner, I think in terms of who we would pick for the winner, I think for us, we're going to go with Jaren Jackson Jr. I think it was a tough choice to make, but I think for someone like Brook Lopez, the deterring factor was the fact that he plays with a guy like Giannis, so that does help him out, getting his defensive numbers up a little bit more. Bam Adebayo, just the winning wasn't there, and the impact, like the defensive impact, just wasn't as good. Like, the Memphis Grizzlies have a better defense. Jaren Jackson Jr. impacts it in more ways than Bam does for his team. And I think from the standpoint that he also is leading the leagues in blocks per game as well.
I think Jaren Jackson Jr. also, he can step out onto the perimeter. Now, this year and last year as well, Brook Lopez has, stepped up a little bit more. Mike Budenholzer has him, not dropping back as much. But Brook Lopez, if you get him out onto the perimeter, he's not the defender that Jaren Jackson is on the perimeter. So I think that's also a determining factor in terms of where we are now in the NBA with switchability. I think Jaren Jackson Jr., I think it'll be a tough award either way between him and Brook Lopez. I don't have a problem with it going either way. But for us, in our opinion, I think we're gonna value the reasons that we gave for Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yeah.
And finally, the most important award is the MVP award. Now, granted, for this award, it's essentially kind of the same names that we've had for the past couple of years.
Although they ruined the trophy, though. The trophy looks weird.
They ruined all the trophies. I don't understand what they're doing with any of these trophies. It looks weird. First of all, they change it on a yearly basis, and then they're doing that stupid ball thing. Like, I don't know, man.
Nah.
Like
I ain't
the
feeling
the trophies look terrible
Bro,
now.
bring back the statue. Let them raise it in front of the crowd. Let's do that shit again.
Yeah, they finally started doing that again last season
yeah,
too,
yeah.
right? So yeah, but obviously the first candidate we're gonna have is Nikola Jokic. He's averaging 25 points a game, 12 rebounds per game, around 10 assists, shooting 63% from the field, 39% from three. Obviously, Nikola Jokic, we've talked about time and time again. He's going crazy on the triple-double thing. He is probably you can argue, the most versatile center of all time. I would certainly say he's the best passing center of all time. And it's gone stale, right? Like how good he's been has gone normal. Similar to, I think, the other guys on this list as well. It's normalized how good they are. But Nikola Jokic has been absolutely historically good once again this season.
And the Nuggets are the number one seed in the West.
Yeah, they clinched the first seed in the West, obviously. Yeah, I think he's just been historically good, and
this is who he is. Like, this is now who he is and who he's going to be now from going forward. Like, the guy's already won back-to-back MVPs, and again, this season alone, you can make another argument for him to win another MVP award.
I think the only downsides with his MVP candidacy, number one, the defensive impact is not as good. Now, granted, I think he gets a worse rep than he deserves on the defensive end, but clearly compared to the other two guys that we're about to name, he does not match up defensively at all. And also the whole voter fatigue thing. Obviously, Nikola Jokic is already a back-to-back MVP. Do voters really want to give him for a third time? He would be the first player since Larry Bird to do that.
But he deserves it.
He definitely deserves it. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, but it's, again, voter fatigue, right?
Yeah.
So I think, I think that's probably the downsides of his MVP candidacy.
Yeah.
Moving on to Joel Embiid, who's going to be our second player on this list. He's averaging 33 points a game, 10 rebounds, shooting 55% from the field. His three-point numbers have been a little bit down this season at 33%, but he's also adding on 1 steal and 1.7 blocks a game. As I was talking about, the two-way impact of Joel Embiid has been really felt for his whole career, and that's continued this season. He's also having a historically good season, a historically good campaign this season. He had multiple 50-point games. I think the thing with Joel Embiid this season compared to previous seasons, number one, I think the Philadelphia 76ers look a lot better and look a lot more consistent without the major flaws that we've seen in previous seasons, especially, with no more Ben Simmons being there. So, yeah, that's one thing. But, yeah, I think the 76ers as a whole have looked a lot better this season. And much of that has to do with Joel Embiid. I think at times, because of injuries, he's really carried them this season. Obviously, James Harden isn't the scorer that he once was. So Joel Embiid has really had to backpack at times through the season. I think credit to him, he's done that relatively well. I think voters are going to factor that in when talking about him. And I think the final point, with his award candidacy compared to the other two guys on this list is that the other two guys have already won the MVP. Joel Embiid is the sort of new face on the block, right? So I think that could also be a major factor in, his bid to win MVP.
I think there's no doubt about it. Joel Embiid has literally been fantastic this season. He's been great on both ends for the Sixers. Like you said, he looks a lot better. The team itself looks better. He's been putting them on his back. That stuff I don't dispute. I think the only biggest knock I have against Joel Embiid is just from the standpoint that his team isn't winning as much as some of the other guys. That's basically what it is. It's a very tough place to be. I think James Harden experienced that for many, many years himself. So obviously, Joel can kind of talk to James about that and be like, yeah, well, we relate. But basically, that's what it comes down to. I mean, I think the winning it matters. I think the fact that the Sixers were very slow to come out of the gate and then they kind of pick things up, I think does factor in. But it doesn't diminish the fact that Joel has had an MVP-worthy season. And yeah, the numbers definitely back it up. Well, he's been relatively healthier this season,
I would say the counter to that argument is that the 76ers and the Nuggets have the exact same record. But obviously, the Nuggets do have the best record in the Western Conference, so I guess you can throw that factor in. But I think the final player we're gonna get to in terms of the MVP award is obviously Giannis Antetokounmpo, averaging 31 points a game, 12 rebounds, 6 assists, shooting 56% from the field. Obviously, he's not really a good 3-point shooter. Um, Similar to the other two players, he's having once again another historic season. I think he's arguably the best player in the league at this point, in a lot of people's eyes, including probably mine. And he is also a two-way monster. We talked about with Brook Lopez, him playing with Giannis Antetokounmpo, and how that factors in. Giannis Antetokounmpo is one of the best defenders in the league and also one of the best offensive players in the league. So I think you have to factor that in. I think the main issue with Giannis's MVP bid is at this point it's similar to what happened with LeBron with the voter fatigue, where it's just Giannis is so consistently good across the board that voters kind of just underrate him in terms of the MVP conversation. And like I said, I think that's what's kind of happening to Giannis in that regard. But either way, he's definitely a top 3 candidate for this award.
I think he's been fantastic this season as well. I mean, you said it. It's another historic season. His team has the best record in the league, despite him missing some time too. And again, like the guy impacts the game on both ends of the floor, and he's just been consistently great. I think for him, the fact that he's constantly back into these conversations is just a testament to how great he's been, similar to what we've seen with LeBron. But LeBron has also won multiple MVP awards as well, so that also could bode well for Giannis. Is that maybe, hey, he didn't win it last year, maybe he could win it again. So that also bodes well for him. But yeah, I definitely think he deserves to be in the conversation at the bare minimum.
Yeah, and I think that's why for our picks, I think we're split on this. For you have Giannis. For me, in terms of Joel Embiid, I have him as my winner for this award. Now, granted, for me, it was between him and Nikola Jokic, but I think even the voter fatigue got to me where I was like, you know what, let's just give it to a new guy. And granted, Joel Embiid, I think it would be a shame if he finished his career with 0 MVPs, considering how good he's been. And so I think for me, I would just give it to him just based on the fact that I kind of want to see a new face.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I was debating the similar between Giannis and Joel, just because I think for Jokic, I don't think they would want to give him 3 straight MVPs.
Especially when he hasn't even gone to the finals yet, which is a bit of an issue.
Yeah, so I don't think they would do that for him. But I think between Giannis and Embiid, I think it just came down to me that Giannis' team just performed better. Like, at the end of the day, that's what matters. And Giannis is a champion. He's gone through that. Joel hasn't proven that he can do that yet. And yeah, I just think Giannis deserves another MVP trophy. Not to say Joel will never win one, but I think Joel needs to win more, like, as a team more, so that way he can garner that same level of respect that Giannis is getting. That's just my opinion on it. But yeah, either way, I mean, it's a tough conversation. We'll see what happens with all these awards. Definitely let us know what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree with our awards picks for the 2022-2023 season? But with that, that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and of course on YouTube. Definitely subscribe so you don't miss more great content from us in the future. Obviously, our playoff round 1 predictions are going to be coming up in the next episode, so definitely stay tuned for that. And obviously, we're going to be doing more rounds in the playoffs and then off-season content as well. So definitely stay tuned for that. Follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Upletter and Under Podcast, Facebook.com/UpAndUnderPodcast for all the latest updates whenever we post a new episode or a reaction to news as they occur. So definitely follow us there. We also post some shorts and some videos as well whenever, some exclusive content on our social media. So, if there's some breaking news or there's topics that we want to talk about quickly, we will be doing that there as well. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so. Also, check out our website, upandunderpodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's a place where we write blog posts with every single episode. So if you don't have time to listen or watch the full thing, you can read about it on our website. Every episode is posted with the video, audio, and the written version all in one place for you. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so. And yeah, man, the NBA playoffs are coming up, man. It's looking to be a very exciting one.
Yeah, man, the play-in is around the corner. I think the Western Conference play-in is going to be good. I think the Eastern Conference play-in is pretty whack, to be honest. But I only have a stake in it because of the Raptors are in it. But the playoffs are going to be good, though.
Yeah, the playoffs are going to be really exciting. So let's stay tuned for that, man. But with that concludes the week's episode. We'll see you guys all in the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.